Drive south through Colombia long enough, and the road begins making decisions for you. The pavement narrows. The guardrails vanish. The towns stop showing up on the map before they stop showing up in person. Colombia has more than 140,000 kilometers of roadway stitched across 3 Andean mountain chains, 2 coastlines, and one of the deepest jungles on the continent. Some of those roads connect cities, some connect tragedies, and some connect places that have not yet decided whether they are finished happening. 13 places in Colombia you should never stop while driving. Some already gone, some going, and some that look completely normal from the road. That last kind is the one that has already been watching you. Town 13, the road that named itself after death. The stretch of highway between Mocoa and San Francisco in the Putumayo department has been called many things. Locals call it the Trampolín de la Muerte, the trampoline of death. It was built in 1930 to move soldiers during the war between Colombia and Peru, and it has been swallowing civilians ever since. 70 kilometers of unpaved single lane, carved into the side of the Andes, 6,000 feet above the valley floor, with no guardrails, no shoulders, and no second chances. Landslides are not interruptions here. They are the road's personality. In 2011 alone, more than 500 people died on this corridor. Crosses and hand-painted warnings line the curves like punctuation marks in a sentence that never ends. You can hear the Moco River far below, but you cannot see it. The mountain decides what you see. The trampoline of death is not a nickname. It is a job description the road has never fulfilling. Town 12, the town the earth swallowed whole. In December of 2010, extreme rainfall from La Nina triggered a catastrophic landslide that did not just damage Gramalote in the department of Norte de Santander. It consumed it. The earth beneath the town began to move and did not stop for weeks. Walls cracked, floors tilted, the church split in half. The slow onset of the collapse allowed all 3,400 residents to evacuate before the town was fully destroyed and no one died. But that does not mean no one was lost. The Colombian government promised to rebuild Gramalote at a new site 3.5 kilometers to the north. That process took more than 13 years. Families were scattered to temporary housing across neighboring municipalities. Children grew up in places that were not home. A study by the University of Colorado documented how the displaced community fractured under the weight of bureaucratic delays, administrative turnover, and unmet promises. Gramalote is not a disaster that happened. It is a disaster that kept happening long after the ground stopped moving. Town 11, the region that runs on lightning and blood. The Catatumbo region in Norte de Santander sits at the far northeastern edge of Colombia, pressed against the Venezuelan border. It is one of the most productive coca-growing zones on the continent and one of the most violent. The National Liberation Army, known as the ELN, dissident factions of the former Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, and narco-trafficking groups have fought over this corridor for decades. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has documented repeated mass displacement events in Catatumbo, with entire villages emptying overnight. In 2023 alone, more than 20,000 people were forcibly displaced from the region. The roads here are not just dangerous because of the terrain. They are dangerous because of who controls them. Invisible checkpoints appear without warning. Vehicles are stopped. People are questioned. Some are allowed to continue. Some are not. The Bari people, the indigenous community whose ancestral territory this has been for centuries, have watched armed groups cycle through their land like seasons. The Catatumbo does not belong to the government. It belongs to whoever is willing to hold it by force. Town 10, the city the rivers buried in its sleep. On the night of March 31, 2017, the Mocoa, Mulato, and Sangoyaco rivers overflowed simultaneously after 130 millimeters of rain fell in a single night. That is 30% of the region's monthly rainfall in a few hours. The resulting mudslide hit the city of Mocoa, capital of the Putumayo department, while most of its 70,000 residents were asleep. The National Disaster Risk Management Unit confirmed 332 dead, 398 injured, and over 4,500 left homeless. 102 of the dead were children. 17 neighborhoods were erased. The hardest hit areas were impoverished communities populated by families already displaced by Colombia's civil war. People who had already lost everything again. The Amazon Conservation Team documented how survivors reported a horrifying sound as boulders rolled downhill toward the town, a sound that still triggers panic when it rains. Mocoa was rebuilt partially, but the rivers that destroyed it have not moved. They are still there, running through the same channels, waiting for the same conditions. Town 9, the river that was granted the rights of a person and is still being poisoned. The Atrato River winds nearly 500 miles from the western Andes, through the department of Choco to the Caribbean Sea. It passes through one of the most biodiverse regions on Earth and one of the most impoverished. Illegal gold mining operations along its banks use mercury to extract gold from sediment, and that mercury has entered the water, the fish, and the people. A 2024 study by the Universidad Tecnológica del Choco found dangerously elevated mercury levels in the blood of children living along the Atrato Basin. In 2016, Colombia's Constitutional Court took the extraordinary step of granting the Atrato River legal personhood, binding the state to protect and restore it. In 2025, 3 United Nations special rapporteurs publicly warned that the ruling had not been enforced. The Afro-Colombian and indigenous Embera communities who depend on the river for food, water, and cultural survival are still drinking from it. The mercury is still flowing. The Atrato was given the rights of a person. It is being treated like none of them are. Town 8, the last town before the jungle decides. Necoclí sits on the Gulf of Urabá in northwestern Colombia, and for most of its history it was a quiet fishing town. It is now one of the busiest migration staging points on the planet. Hundreds of thousands of people from Venezuela, Haiti, Ecuador, China, and dozens of other countries pass through Necoclí each year on their way to the Darien Gap, the 60-mile stretch roadless jungle between Colombia and Panama. In 2023, more than 520,000 people crossed the Darien. In 2024, that number was over 300,000. The town's economy has been restructured around migrants. Boat rides across the bay to Akandi, the gateway to the jungle, cost more than most travelers can afford. The Gulf Clan, Colombia's largest drug trafficking organization, controls the routes and collects an estimated $125 per person. A local government official told humanitarian researchers in 2024 that the municipality must prioritize residents over transient migrants, but there are no longer enough resources for either. Necoclí is not a town that failed. It is a town that was repurposed by a crisis no one planned for and no one has stopped. Town 7, the village where they played music while they killed. In February of 2000, approximately 350 members of the United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia entered the village of El Salado in the Montes de Maria region of Bolívar Department. Over the course of several days, they tortured and killed at least 60 people. Some accounts place the number above 100. The attackers used machetes, stones, and power tools. They played music on drums. They forced residents to watch. Colombia's National Center for Historical Memory published a detailed reconstruction titled in their words that war was not ours, documenting how the massacre was part of a wave of 42 mass killings across Montes de Maria between 1999 and 2001 that left 354 people dead. The Colombian Navy was aware of the paramilitary advance and did not intervene. More than 2,500 residents fled into the surrounding mountains. El Salado was emptied for months. Some families returned, many did not. The village is quieter now. That is not the same as peaceful. Town 6, the city buried under the volcano it was warned about. On the night of November 13, 1985, Nevado del Ruiz erupted. The eruption was not large. It registered a 3 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index. But it melted enough of the summit glacier to send a wall of volcanic mud, rock, and water racing down the Lagunillas River Valley at 50 kilometers per hour. The lahar reached the town of Armero in the department of Tolima at approximately 11:30 at night. More than 23,000 of the town's 29,000 residents were killed. Most were asleep. The town had been built on top of previous lahar deposits. It had been destroyed by the same volcano in 1595 and again in 1845. A hazard map completed just weeks before the eruption identified Armero as a zone of 100% lahar probability. That map was printed in 10 copies. An evacuation was ordered by the Red Crosses in the nearby city of Ibagué. It never reached Armero. The mayor was heard on a ham radio, saying he did not think there was much danger. He was killed minutes later. A 13-year-old girl named Omaira Sanchez became a symbol of the disaster after being trapped in debris for 3 days while the world watched. She died on camera. Armero is not a ruin. It is a cemetery the size of a town. The Colombian government declared the site holy ground. The volcano is still active. Town 5, the jungle that has never been crossed without a cost. The Darien Gap is a 96-kilometer stretch of mountains, swamps, and rainforest between Colombia and Panama. It is the only break in the Pan-American Highway, which otherwise runs uninterrupted for 30,000 kilometers from Alaska to the southern tip of Argentina. No road has ever been built through it. No road is likely to be. The International Organization for Migration reported 536 migrant deaths in the Darien between 2015 and 2024, with 170 to 2024 alone. Doctors Without Borders treated 676 victims of sexual assault in the jungle in 2023. Women and children make up more than half of those who attempt the crossing. UNICEF reported that more than 30,000 children traversed the gap in the first 4 months of 2024, a 40% increase over the previous year. Some were unaccompanied. Some were born on the trail. Criminal groups and paramilitary factions control the routes, extort travelers, and assault those who cannot pay. The bodies that do not make it out are left where they fall. The jungle absorbs them. The Darien Gap is not a border, it is a filter, and it does not care what passes through. Town 4, the massacre the military knew was coming and let happen. On May 2, 2002, fighting between FARC guerrillas and paramilitary forces of the United Self-Defense Forces reached the town of Bojaya in the department of Choco. Approximately 300 civilians sought shelter inside the town's church. A homemade cylinder bomb fired by the FARC was aimed at the paramilitaries positioned outside. It went through the roof of the church instead. At least 79 people were killed inside, including 45 children. Some estimates place the total dead at 119. The regional ombudsman and the United Nations had both warned the Colombian army that combat was imminent and that civilians were at risk. The army's 17th Brigade did not intervene. A Colombian court later ordered the state to compensate the victims for failing to protect them. In the aftermath, the town was abandoned. The population relocated a few miles south to a new settlement called Bella Vista. The church remains. Inside it, a statue of Christ still stands. The explosion tore off both of its arms. It is known as the Mutilated Christ. In 2017, Pope Francis blessed it during a visit to Colombia. The former town of Bojaya is being reclaimed by jungle. Armed groups still occupy in the surrounding territory. The Afro-Colombian community that survived the massacre still lives along the Atrato River. The conflict that produced the massacre did not end. It changed uniforms. Town 3, the port where people are taken apart. Buenaventura is Colombia's largest Pacific port. More than 60% of the country's imports pass through it. It is also one of the most dangerous cities in the Western Hemisphere. Between 2010 and 2013, more than 150 people were reported missing in Buenaventura, twice as many as in any other municipality in Colombia. Human Rights Watch documented the existence of structures known as casas de pique, chop houses. Paramilitary successor groups operating in the city's waterfront neighborhoods used these buildings to dismember victims, sometimes while they were still alive, before dumping the remains in the bay or burying them in hidden graves. Residents described hearing screams from inside. The groups control movement between neighborhoods through invisible boundaries. Crossing the wrong street can be fatal. Between 2010 and 2013, Buenaventura led all Colombian municipalities in newly displaced people. More than 56,000 fled. Children were recruited by gangs. Community leaders who spoke out were assassinated, including Temístocles Machado, killed in 2018 for opposing the port expansion. The Valle del Cauca department recorded 879 missing persons in a single recent year, the highest in all of Colombia. Buenaventura is not a city with a violence problem. It is a city where violence is the infrastructure. The port keeps running, the ships keep loading. The chop houses were never all found. Town 2, the site that was declared holy because there was nothing left to save. Drive back to Armero. Not the story of the eruption, the story of what is there now. The Colombian government declared the buried town a memorial site, but for years it was largely untended. Wooden crosses appeared. Small shrines were built by families who had no graves to visit. The lahar deposit hardened into a gray crust that covers everything: homes, schools, hospitals, streets. Trees have grown through it. In some places, the outlines of buildings are still visible beneath the surface. In others, there is nothing, just flat gray earth and silence. Survivors of the disaster were resettled in the nearby town of Lerida and in newly constructed developments. Many struggled for decades with psychological trauma, poverty, and institutional neglect. Nevado del Ruiz erupted again in 1989 and remains active. The Colombian Geological Service monitors it continuously. An estimated 500,000 people now live in the lahar hazard zones surrounding the volcano. The geography has not changed. The glacier is smaller than it was in 1985, but it is still there. The rivers still run through the same valleys. Armero is not a tragedy that ended. It is a warning that was answered with a memorial and a promise that the next time would be different. The volcano has not confirmed that. And finally, Town 1, the place where the war never left. Return to the Atrato River. Follow it north through the department of Chaco until the jungle closes in and the road disappears entirely. The communities along this corridor, Embera, Wunan, Afro-Colombian, have been caught between armed groups for longer than most Colombians have been alive. The FARC signed a peace deal in 2016. The paramilitaries officially demobilized a decade before that. But in the years since, dissident FARC factions, the ELN and the Gaitness Self-Defense Forces have moved into the vacuum. The pattern is the same. Armed men arrive. They establish control. They recruit children. They restrict movement. They kill anyone who resists. And then, when the political winds shift, they are replaced by another group who does the same thing under a different name. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has documented forced confinement of indigenous and Afro-Colombian communities along the Atrato and its tributaries, where entire villages are forbidden from leaving for weeks at a time. Food runs out. Medicine runs out. Children stop going to school because the school is across a boundary no one is allowed to cross. The Colombian government's victims unit has registered Choco as one of the departments with the highest rates of forced displacement in the country year after year, decade after decade. The Embera and Wunan communities have filed formal complaints. The Constitutional Court has issued protective orders. The violence continues. I want you to sit with that for a moment. The court recognized the river as a person. The court ordered the communities protected. And still, families are confined to their homes while armed men patrol the waterways outside. The Atrato keeps flowing, the jungle keeps closing in, and the communities along its banks keep waiting for a protection order that arrives on paper and never arrives in person. This is not a place where something terrible happened. This is a place where something terrible is still happening right now, while the rest of the country looks the other way. 13 places. A road that has been killing since 1930 and has never been repaved. A town the earth digested over the course of weeks while the government took 13 years to rebuild it. A region where coca and conflict have made the roads belong to whoever carries the most guns. A city buried by its own rivers while its children slept. A waterway poisoned by mercury and granted the rights of a person that no one has honored. A fishing town converted into a staging ground for the largest migration crisis in the hemisphere. A village where paramilitaries played drums while they slaughtered families. A city entombed by the volcano it was warned about 3 times across 4 centuries. A jungle that swallows the desperate and does not return them. A church where a bomb tore the arms off Christ and the army watched from a safe distance. A port where people are dismembered in houses the neighbors can hear. A memorial built on top of 23,000 bodies with the same volcano still burning above it. And a river corridor where the war never ended, it just stopped being reported. These are not broken places. Broken places have stopped. These places are still being decided. Have you ever driven through a place and felt the geography itself was wrong? Not haunted, not dangerous, just wrong in a way you could feel before you could explain it. Tell us in the comments. Say where you were and what the road felt like. We might use it in our next video. And if you live here, we want to hear from you most of all. Every country has places the maps do not do justice to. Roads worth pulling over for, stories that only locals know. Tell us where we should stop. And if you want to see it made, make sure you comment and subscribe.